I thought we were together. Everything else was just noise then. My own breath, the soft simmer of sauce on the stove, the distant hum of neighborly laughter outside. Garlic and rosemary filled the kitchen with their calm familiarity, and I remember how my heart felt steady as I stirred the pot. The spoon tapped gently against the pan, a measured, comforting rhythm that told me life was still in order. But that was before I glanced through the window and saw her, Emily, my wife. She stood across the yard, under the glow of the neighbor's porch lights, leaning into another man's embrace. I blinked once, twice, as if somehow my eyes were mistaken. But she was there, and so was he, a man with a confident tilt to his posture, dark curls flopping over his forehead, one strong arm around her waist. His lips brushed her ear. She didn't pull away. I felt something seize my throat, a muscle so deep I'd never known it existed, tightening until I could barely swallow. The wooden spoon quivered in my hand. A bubble rose in the sauce and popped, splattering the stovetop. Outside, the neighbors kept talking, raising their beers in a toast to some weekend success story. Laughter, bright and carefree. Their silhouettes danced behind a lit canopy, oblivious to me, oblivious to the tremor now overtaking my body. At first, I just stood there. I didn't shout, didn't bang on the window, didn't even step onto the porch. I set the spoon down with deliberate care, turned off the burner, and wiped my hands on my apron. The cotton felt rough against my palms. The skin there had gone oddly numb, as though the center of me had been scooped out and was floating somewhere else. Yet my mind was cold and precise. The sauce would burn if I left the stove on. I opened the back door and walked outside. I don't remember shutting it. I'm not sure I even closed it behind me. My only memory is the hush inside my own ears and the dull roar outside. My feet carried me across the lawn like I was a ghost. For a second, I thought about confronting them, Emily and this stranger, but some glimmer of pride, or maybe fear, held me back. I saw him lean forward, his hand slipping around her hip, and she arched her neck in a way I recognized all too well. The sight was so intimate I felt my gut twist. I stumbled, just a little, in the dark grass. I left without a word. The next morning, she stood on our doorstep, eyes puffy, hair in disarray. Emily's voice trembled with a sorrow so raw it cut the air between us. "Michael," she started, and the sound of my name on her lips stung. "It's not what you think." It was stupid. We had drinks. My gaze flicked to her face, then away. I set down the paper I'd been reading, took an unsteady breath. I didn't want to speak yet. My voice might crack. She stepped closer, her hand trembling on the doorknob. "Please," she murmured. "Let me explain. It was just a mistake. Nothing real, nothing that matters." I nodded once, not because I believed her, but because I was trying to figure out if I felt anything beyond this crushing numbness in my chest. I gestured for her to come inside, still wearing the same apron from last night. The edges of it were flecked with dried sauce. A faint memory of stirring, tasting, giving her that special dinner. It all felt like a half-forgotten dream. She dropped her keys onto the kitchen counter with a clatter. Her words tumbled out too fast. We stayed later than we meant to. Everyone was dancing, and I guess we both got carried away. I know it looks bad, but I studied her. No bruises, no real outward sign of guilt beyond the tears in her eyes. She said it was the alcohol. She said she barely remembered. She said she didn't even feel anything for him. I wondered if she believed any of it herself. Was she lying to me or to herself? Probably both. But I knew better already. The babysitter's camera had been left on by mistake a few nights earlier, an entirely different night from the one I just witnessed. I had it on my phone, the date, and time stamped. A quick check of the memory card confirmed my worst suspicions. Emily and that man, Ryan, I learned soon after, had been in our bedroom, the same room where our daughter's shoes littered the floor. The camera picked up more than I wish it had. I tried not to imagine the details, tried not to see the way her breath might have caught in her throat, or how her cheeks flushed under his touch. My mind refused to cooperate. The images came in fragments, a body leaning on another body, a whisper close to the ear, a silent gasp. It wasn't me, but it was my home, my wife. She kept talking. Her voice turned high-pitched, desperate. I said nothing. I just took off my apron, folded it carefully, and placed it on the counter. Then I invited her for dinner that evening, as calmly as I could. My stomach churned at the sight of her stunned expression, but I forced the tension from my face. "All right," she whispered. "We can talk, maybe. Fix this." She clung to that hope, that maybe I'd let it slide, that we'd have a big fight, cry it out, and move on. But I'd already made up my mind. The sense of betrayal lodged like a steel pin behind my sternum. For a man who valued loyalty above all else, this was the unthinkable. We had a child together, a life, and she'd let him into our home. This Ryan Carter, a freelance developer with an easy grin and a taste for risk. What cut the deepest was the lie Emily told me with her eyes, that nothing happened, or it was trivial. She couldn't bring herself to admit how far it had gone. But the camera had captured them, half-dressed, her fingers laced into his hair, his mouth at her neck. A series of muffled gasps, a drawn-out moan. Shadows, shapes, the glow from the hallway lighting the spectacle. My heart hammered so hard I thought my ribs might crack. I had to shut off the video before it ended. So I said nothing. I stood by the sink, nodding as she wept, murmuring that we find a way. And by doing so, I think I'd watched part of her fear shift into relief. She took my hand, tried to press it to her chest. I let her do it, but my palm felt like dead weight. That evening, she showed up for dinner as promised. She wore a blouse she knew I liked, light blue, airy fabric. Her hair was brushed behind her ears. She tried to smile at me. I poured wine. We sat across from each other, clinking glasses like we were still a couple in love. A lifetime. We'd had a million dinners like this, but now everything felt staged, as though we were actors reciting lines for a camera's lens. I watched how her eyes darted around the kitchen, seeking something, my forgiveness, maybe, or a sign that she wasn't living in a nightmare. She hardly touched her pasta. I noticed her fork shaking when she tried to twirl a strand of spaghetti. My own appetite was gone, replaced by a cold knot in my gut. Still, I asked her about her day, about her job, about the new social project she was coordinating. She answered with trembling politeness. Our conversation was a hollow echo of the life we've once built. I kept waiting for her to burst out crying again, or to lash out, to say something like, "I can't do this anymore. It's too tense." But she didn't. She forced that trembling smile and asked if I'd seen our daughter's latest drawing for school. I told her yes, that I'd pinned it to the fridge. Another careful sip of wine. Her gaze slid off mine like water on oil. A part of me, the part that still loved the memory of us, wanted to stop this charade and shout. Ask her how she could let that man touch her in our bed. Demand she pack her bags and leave. Or maybe throw my glass against the wall and watch it shatter. But I held it all in. I was finding out how strong a man can be when everything inside him is already broken. Over the following weeks, I built my revenge. I don't recall the exact moment I decided to destroy her life. It was slow, methodical, one calculated step after another. There's a certain emptiness that grows in a man when he's been betrayed, a vacuum that sucks out any compassion. And inside that void, I found a new clarity. My job in sales taught me how to plan, how to handle details. A signed contract here, a fake email chain there. I had the skills. I just had to weaponize them. I set her up. I planted files on her laptop, documents and images that would raise eyebrows if the right people saw them. I doctored messages to suggest she was involved in questionable activities. I studied the encryption logs so that if an investigation ever happened, it would look like she'd been exchanging data with someone who had no business near our daughter. The details matter, but they're also painfully dull. Let's just say I made it all look real enough. Then I bought a new iPhone, untraceable to me, and used it to send an anonymous tip to the local police. I hinted that a grown man, Ryan Carter, had been seen in her bedroom while our little girl slept just one door away. I implied there was more than just a casual fling, painted it as something deviant, something that demanded an official look. I remember sitting in my car, across from her workplace, waiting. She emerged in her tailored coat, clutching her purse, her face a mask of worry and confusion as an unmarked police car pulled up. 2 officers approached her. I couldn't hear their words, but I saw the panic bloom in her eyes. She tried to keep calm, but her lips moved too quickly. They asked her to come with them. She hesitated, then nodded. She disappeared into the back of that car with the look of a trapped animal. My heart pounded with a savage thrill. Yet, beneath that surge of triumph, I felt a pang of guilt. A voice in my mind asked, "Are you sure about this? Is it worth it?" I strangled that voice. I told myself, she betrayed you first. On the day they finally released her, she came home like a shadow. She collected some clothes in a suitcase, face hollow, eyes darting around in terror. I watched from my car parked down the street. She paused at the door, scanning the road as if hoping to see me, hoping for a rescue from this new reality. She couldn't see me behind the tinted windows. Or maybe she felt my presence but didn't know where to look. A single tear traced down her cheek. She stared at the place where my sit-in used to park, as if expecting me to pull in at any moment and say, "Everything's fine. Let's talk." I didn't move. She eventually dragged her suitcase to a cab. The trunk slammed shut, and the driver took off. My phone vibrated with a message from my sister in Detroit, something about visiting for the holidays. I let it ring. I was busy watching my wife vanish from the life she'd known. A wave of calm wrapped around me, but it was a hollow, lonely calm. That same night, I sat at the dining table in the half-empty house, the lights off, the curtains drawn. I pressed my fingers against the cool surface of the table and pictured Emily's hands there, the ring on her finger glinting. My own ring felt tight, like it was strangling the skin. I twisted it a few times, then slid it off with an almost surgical patience. The faint impression of a circle remained on my hand. The next morning, our daughter asked, "Where's Mommy?" She was too little to grasp the complexities, to know how betrayal tastes. I told her, in the softest voice I could manage, that Mommy was away, that she'd be back soon. My chest squeezed with a shame I couldn't explain to a child. I loved my daughter more than anything, but I also craved the destruction of the woman who gave birth to her. That contradiction churned in me like a poison I swallowed every day. I drowned myself in daily tasks, selling property, cooking elaborate meals for my daughter, going for late runs to numb my mind. The weeks blurred. Emily texted me once, from a number I didn't recognize. "I need to see her, please." I ignored it. Next came an email from her lawyer with requests about visitation. I read it twice, deleted it. She had no ground to stand on, not with the mounting suspicion around her. People talk, and neighbors begin to whisper. The rumors took on a life of their own. One evening, after I put our daughter to bed, I stared at the blank television screen. My reflection looked back, stern brow, tight jaw, eyes that no longer recognized the man they belonged to. I thought about how everything had started with me stirring sauce in our kitchen, feeling safe in my own world. Then I remembered the flicker of movement in the window, the angle of Emily's head leaning into Ryan's. My chest burned, and I realized I'd been holding my breath for too long. I let it out in a slow, trembling exhale. For the first time since it all happened, I admitted a thought that had been gnawing at me. Maybe I'd done something wrong too. Not the cheating, but the slow drifting apart. The times I shut her out, the nights I came home late from the office, too tired to listen to her stories. We were two strangers sharing a house, each lost in our own routines. A small seed of guilt rooted itself in me. I tried to crush it, but it festered. The more I fed my hatred, the more that guilt coughed up questions. Did I push her away? Should I have seen the signs? No matter how I turned it in my mind, though, the betrayal remained. I told myself, she could have spoken up, told me she felt alone. Anything but that. But then again, maybe she had, and I never heard. My eyes closed, and my fists balled up on my knees. I sat in the dark with that question digging at my insides. A few days later, a friend of mine from college, Greg, called. He'd heard rumors, something about Emily being under investigation, and he wanted to check on me. "What's going on, man?" he asked, voice uneasy. "I heard something crazy about your wife and some guy. Maybe a custody issue. People are saying." I cut him off. "I can't talk now," I said. My voice felt too rough, like sandpaper. "We're fine." Then I hung up. My breathing stuttered in my chest. Paranoia, or something like it, slithered in. If word was spreading, how long before it circled back to me? Emily might piece together that I orchestrated it all. She might guess. My blood pounded with a fear that I hadn't anticipated. I tried to bury it in the usual ways: workouts, cooking, staying busy with phone calls and clients. But the gnawing feeling remained. Every time I saw a police cruiser on the road, my palms got clammy. Every text message made me jump. When a coworker asked, "You all right, Mike? You look tired," I forced a grin and mumbled something about needing a vacation. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter seemed to vanish. Maybe he moved away or just kept his head down to avoid the scandal. Part of me was disappointed. I wanted him to resurface, to show his face so I could confront him properly. Another part of me was relieved. If he stayed out of the picture, there was less chance for my scheme to unravel. One evening, I came home to find a small package at my doorstep. No return address, a plain padded envelope. I carried it inside cautiously, made sure our daughter was busy in her room, then opened it with a letter opener. Inside was a USB flash drive. Nothing else. My heart kicked up. My mind replayed every possibility. Emily sending me something. Ryan, the babysitter. The police. I took it to my office, closed the door, and plugged it into an old laptop disconnected from the internet. The drive contained one file, a video. I clicked it, bracing myself. It was footage from that same babysitter's camera, but a different angle I hadn't seen. Emily and Ryan in the bedroom, close enough to see their faces. It was quick, blurry, but unmistakable. She was letting him undress her. She leaned back against the wall, her lips parted. A stifled moan slipped out, even though the audio quality was poor. My stomach twisted, and I paused it, bile stinging my throat. Then I dragged the timeline forward, forcing myself to see the rest. A few chaotic seconds, half-naked limbs. Then the file ended abruptly. At first my hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the laptop. Anger, humiliation, that old guilt. It rushed back in a single wave. I slammed the lid shut, swallowing hard. Was someone threatening me? Or was it Emily, trying to confess more truth? The question hammered at my thoughts. The next few weeks crawled. My carefully orchestrated illusions still held, but I moved through life as if walking on ice. I'd done exactly what I set out to do, ruined her. Yet each night, I dreamt of the day we were married. How I'd kissed her under the summer sun, how the ring had sparkled on her hand, how she laughed in sheer joy. I'd wake up drenched in sweat, haunted by the memory of that joy now turned to ashes. I started getting texts from unknown numbers. Random, short lines like, "You're a cold man," or "Hope you're proud." Usually, I ignored them, but they eroded my nerves. Once, around midnight, another text arrived. "We both lost." I stared at it for a long minute, my phone trembling in my grip. Eventually, I typed back, "Who are you?" No response. It could have been Ryan. Maybe Emily. Or maybe a friend of hers who suspected me. I locked my phone, tossed it on the bedside table. Our daughter was asleep in the next room, and I stared at the ceiling, adrenaline coursing through me. My mind repeated a single question. Did I go too far? But even if I'd wanted to pull back, it was too late. The police file existed. The accusations lingered. The forged logs, the suspicious documents. It was all out there. That unstoppable boulder was already rolling downhill. My conscience wouldn't stop it. Not now. We were supposed to have a hearing, something about temporary custody, but her side kept delaying. Maybe her lawyer was incompetent, or maybe Emily was in no position to face me in court yet. I wondered if she still had her job, or if the rumor mill had devoured her professional life too. The taste of bitterness lined my mouth. I reminded myself. She did this first. Late one night, I dug up an old photo album. My mother's face smiled at me from yellowing pages. My father too. I flipped to a shot of me at age 7, brandishing a new fishing pole. My father's arm was around my shoulders. That memory was so clear. How proud he was, how safe I felt in his presence. With a jolt, I realized I wanted to protect my daughter the same way. To keep her safe from a mother who'd betrayed us, from a world that might scar her innocence. But also, deep down, I wondered if I'd shattered her chance at a normal life by turning her mother into a pariah. Would she ever forgive me if she found out? I pressed the album shut. The words of my father echoed in my head. You stand by your family, boy. He'd said it once when I argued with my mother, a small spat about chores. I stared at the album's cover. Stand by your family. But that was before I learned how ugly betrayal could be. Emily tried to call once more. This time I picked up, not speaking, just listening. Michael, she said, her voice unsteady. I just want to know our daughter is okay. Are you there? I cleared my throat. She's fine. How are you? She asked softly. My jaw clenched. We're fine, I repeated. She was silent for a long moment. Then, in a near whisper, I'm so sorry. I said nothing. My heart thudded. I wanted to hiss, it's too late. Instead, I cut the call. My hand shook as I placed the phone on the counter. No matter how many times I told myself I'd done the right thing, each new sign of her regret scraped at my conscience. But regret doesn't erase facts. It doesn't rewind the images from that camera or wipe away her dishonesty. I pictured Ryan's face again. The confident tilt of his lips, the sureness of his hands on my wife's body. Rage flared hot in my chest. I remembered a conversation with Emily, years back, about how she hated men who swaggered. Too sure of themselves, she'd said. It's like they have no idea how fragile life is. But apparently, she changed her tune. Some nights, I fantasized about confronting Ryan physically, smashing that grin off his face, letting him know exactly how it felt to have your life upended. But each time, I pictured our daughter's wide eyes, imagining me behind bars or in handcuffs, and my anger morphed into a cold acceptance that I had done enough damage. The day of the hearing finally arrived. I walked into the courthouse in a suit that felt heavier than chainmail. My attorney, a brusque woman named Whitehall, guided me to a bench outside the small windowless meeting room. Emily hadn't arrived yet. My stomach churned with anticipation, dread, and something resembling sorrow. Ryan Carter never showed. Probably for the best. The hearing was brief. Some technicalities about the allegations, the ongoing investigation, the best interests of our daughter. Emily's lawyer stammered about how the police had found no criminal wrongdoing yet, how it was all a misunderstanding. Whitehall calmly presented the documents. The logs, my forged handiwork. I kept my face stony, feeling each word hammer into Emily's reputation like a coffin nail. Emily herself didn't speak at first. She gripped a tissue in her hands, glancing at me from time to time with eyes that pleaded. When it was her turn, she said in a trembling voice, I made a mistake, but I'm not a danger to my child. She tried to explain the situation with Ryan, calling it an affair, a lapse in judgment, but swore it was no threat to our daughter. The judge, who had heard 100 other pleas that day, gave her a weary look. He asked a few pointed questions about the explicit nature of the alleged materials. She couldn't respond. Her tears choked her words. Afterwards, we emerged from that courthouse with an interim order favoring me. I was to retain primary custody until further notice. Emily was granted limited visitation rights, subject to conditions. She stood in the hallway, shoulders slumped, staring at the official papers. I was close enough to hear her quiet sobs. A hush fell around us as people passed by, pretending not to notice. I didn't comfort her. My knuckles were white around my briefcase handle. I told myself, this is what you wanted. She looked up at me then, tears shimmering. I don't know how it came to this, she whispered. Her hair fell around her face in limp strands. We had a life. I didn't reply. I felt my jaw muscles tighten, but no words formed. She exhaled shakily. I wish you told me how lonely you were, she said. I wish I told you how lonely I was. A spike of pain shot through me. I turned away without speaking, stepping into the elevator. The door slid shut on her shattered expression. My heart pounded like a war drum. I pressed my forehead to the cold metal wall, trying not to think, not to feel. In the parking lot, I sat behind the wheel of my car, engine off, keys trembling in my fist. I stared at the lines of vehicles around me and felt an ache in my chest that nearly overwhelmed me. I'd won, but it felt like losing. We were both hollow now, stripped of any illusions. And deep inside, a voice asked if I was truly sure I'd do it all again. I shoved the key into the ignition. The engine hummed to life. Months dragged on. I barely spoke to Emily, only dealing with the court-appointed mediator about visitation details. My daughter asked about her mom. I'd say, Mommy's busy, but she loves you. She was too young to see the bigger picture, and I was careful to shield her from my bitterness. Meanwhile, I immersed myself in work, rising quickly in the ranks of my real estate firm. I was good at selling illusions, after all. One late afternoon, I drove by our old neighborhood, where some families were setting up a street party. My daughter was with a babysitter, so I had time to think. I passed the neighbors' houses. Decorations swayed in the breeze, lights dangled from the fences. My mind flashed to that night, the night Emily stood with Ryan on the lawn, the warm summer air swirling around them. I couldn't unsee it. I pulled over. The house that used to be ours had a for sale sign out front. I realized, with a hollow jolt, that Emily must have put it on the market. Maybe she was finalizing the sale to pay legal bills. Through the living room window, I glimpsed a shape move. A potential buyer, maybe. This was the home we'd lived in for years, where our daughter learned to walk, where we once laughed and grew. It was no longer ours. I sat there for half an hour, engine idling. A sign of who I'd become, a man paralyzed by the ashes of his own revenge. I finally shifted into drive, heading back to the condo I now rented with my daughter. She was the one link to my old self. Without her, I might have vanished into that void of hatred, but I still had to be a father, even if I was no longer a husband. Emily called again on a Tuesday morning. I answered out of habit, or maybe curiosity. Before she could speak, I said, yes. She hesitated. Michael, my hearing's coming up soon. The detective found some inconsistencies in the evidence. They want me to come in for more questions. A trembling breath. I know you did something. I can't prove it, but I feel it. My throat went dry. Are you accusing me? I replied, forcing calm into my tone. She swallowed. I heard it through the phone. I can't do this anymore. I lost my job. People are whispering that I'm someone horrible. I don't have the money for a proper defense. Ryan left town. Everything is upside down. Silence stretched between us. Why are you telling me? I managed. Because I don't believe you hate me enough to let me rot. No matter what I did, I know you loved me once. That was the moment I felt something inside me quake. I wanted to spit out that she betrayed me, that she deserved every tear she'd shed. But the memory of her tearful eyes, the child we share, the life we built, It all pressed against my chest. I fought for breath. "Michael," she whispered. I hung up. My mind spun in circles. I kept replaying her words. "I don't believe you hate me enough." Did I hate her enough? I'd made her life a nightmare, but in that moment, I realized part of me was still the naive man who believed we'd be together forever. On the day Emily was called in for further questioning, I parked outside the station. Just as she stepped out, a suitcase in her hand, I watched her from behind tinted windows again. She glanced around, eyes hollow. Possibly, she was preparing to leave town if the questioning went poorly. Or maybe she'd just lost her apartment and had nowhere else to stash her belongings. The ache in my chest felt like a drill bit. She moved slowly, as though each step demanded all her will. When she turned her head, our eyes almost met through the windshield. At least it felt that way. My pulse jerked. Her gaze was distant, searching the horizon for any sign of me. Her hair, once so meticulously styled, hung limp. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She looked older, worn down by heartbreak and fear, and I felt no triumph. I did this, I told myself. I was the instrument of her downfall. I recalled my father's old words about standing by your family. What would he say now if he saw me skulking in my car, letting the mother of my child stand alone? As she slid into a taxi, her shoulders drooped in defeat. I let her go. She was gone before the traffic light turned green. I stared at the space where her cab had been, wondering if I'd done irreparable damage to everything I once cherished. That night, my daughter was in her room, obliviously playing with her new toys. I busied myself in the kitchen, chopping vegetables. The repetition of the knife soothed me. I tried to focus on each slice, the gentle crunch of carrot under steel. But my mind wandered to the past, to that first swirl of garlic and rosemary. The night I realized everything had changed. Why did I do it? The question wouldn't let up. I told myself it was justice, that she deserved it. But the truth is, I felt an unbearable sense of shame, as if her betrayal was my own failure. If I had been a better husband, maybe I wouldn't have had to see her eyes shine for another man. Perhaps that shame gnawed at my pride so fiercely that I had to destroy her to ease the sting. Still, none of that rewrote the betrayal or my daughter's uncertain future. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. The smell of onions made my eyes water, and for a moment I couldn't tell if it was the onions or tears. After dinner, I tucked my daughter into bed. Read her a story about a brave knight who faced a dragon. She fell asleep. I lingered by her bedside, watching her peaceful face. She was my anchor to sanity now, a reminder of innocence in a world I twisted with bitterness. Downstairs, I flicked on the TV, flipping through channels aimlessly. Nothing stuck, just a swirl of commercials and contrived dramas. My thoughts drifted back to Emily's voice. "I know you did something." And she was right. So far, no one had pinned it on me. But the guilt was like an invisible brand on my skin, burning deeper each day. Days turned into weeks, and I tried to carry on. My plan had succeeded. I was the stable parent, the reliable provider, the upstanding citizen. Emily was the one with police records and swirling rumors. The neighbors pitied me. Some even praised my strength for protecting my daughter. Irony can be cruel, but the weight of it was unbearable. I started losing sleep. I'd drift off for an hour, dream of Emily's tear-streaked face, then jerk awake, drenched in sweat. When morning came, I'd stand in front of the mirror, not recognizing the man who stared back. Sharp lines of exhaustion, cold eyes. One Sunday, I decided to drive out to the old fishing spot in Michigan, where my father once took me as a boy. I arranged for a neighbor to watch my daughter for the day. I needed space to breathe. The drive was about 4 hours, spent in near silence except for my thoughts. The lake was still there, ringed by pine trees, though the caretaker's cottage had changed hands a few times. I parked by the shore. A swirl of memories crashed over me. My father teaching me to bait a hook, the smell of the water, the excitement of my first catch. I took off my shoes and socks, rolled up my pant legs, and waded in. The cold water lapped around my calves, as sharp as pins. I closed my eyes, letting the chill creep up. For a moment, I tried to imagine turning back the clock, undoing all that had happened, from the moment I first saw Emily leaning into Ryan's arms. Maybe if I had shouted her name that night, forced her to confront me, none of this would have spiraled. Maybe we'd have parted ways less violently. Maybe we could have salvaged some kindness for each other. I felt my throat tighten. With eyes closed, I spoke quietly to the ghost of my father, to the memory of who I was. I don't know who I am anymore. The echo of water rippled around me, offering no reply. Eventually, I returned to Chicago. Life marched on. My routine resumed. I got my daughter ready for school, closed deals at work, ironed my shirts every Sunday, and pretended I was the same reliable Michael Donovan. But inside, I was like a building with rotten beams, outwardly upright, inwardly close to collapse. A letter arrived by certified mail. I signed for it, carried it into the kitchen. My chest constricted when I saw it was from Emily's lawyer. I dreaded flipping it open, but did so anyway. Inside was a carefully worded statement. They had uncovered digital irregularities in the evidence that contributed to Emily's tarnished record. Allegations of forgery. They were requesting a formal inquiry, possibly pressing charges if she could prove malicious intent. My hand clenched around the paper so hard it crinkled. I read it twice. She'd found a thread to pull on, one that might unravel my entire plan. And the penalty for forging evidence could be severe. That voice inside me hissed, "You had to push it too far." I paced the kitchen. My daughter was out in the yard, playing. My heart hammered as I considered the possibility that everything I'd done would blow up in my face. Losing custody, losing my job, maybe even facing criminal charges. My breath came shallow and fast. Then I forced myself to calm down. The forgeries were skillfully done. She'd have to find an expert to prove the logs were faked. That might be expensive, time-consuming. But Emily was desperate, desperate enough to push for the truth. My phone rang. The number was blocked. I hesitated, then picked up. "Is it worth it?" A familiar female voice, low, broken with tears. Emily again. "Michael, you can stop this. If you say you faked it, they might go easier on you. We can talk. I don't want to ruin you. I just want to stop this nightmare." My vision blurred. Her words hammered at my conscience. "Why call me now?" I forced out, "Because I know what you did. And despite everything, I don't want our daughter growing up with both parents destroyed." She paused. "We both screwed up, Michael. I swear, I never meant to." Anger flared. "You invited him into our bed." She flinched, audible even over the phone. "It wasn't in our bed. She stopped herself, voice trembling. "Maybe it doesn't matter. But please meet me. We can find a way that doesn't tear us both apart. I'll do anything. Just let's talk, for her sake." For a moment, I almost said yes. But pride is a harsh master. Pride and the memory of her body with his. My lips curled in bitterness, and I rasped, "We're done." I ended the call. She texted an address a few minutes later. A coffee shop on the outskirts of town. A time. I erased the text unread. The weeks that followed were a flurry of legal motions and behind-the-scenes threats. My lawyer insisted that the evidence was legitimate. Emily's side demanded forensic experts. I began to fear that I'd be dragged into depositions or forced to lie under oath. My nights were plagued with nightmares. My daughter started asking more questions about her mom. I deflected them, feeling sicker each time. One evening, the babysitter left a note. "Your daughter talked about missing her mommy today. She seems sad." That note twisted in my gut. I stared at it for a long while, my eyes burning. Then I carefully tore it into pieces and threw it in the trash. I realized something crucial then. I'd built my entire revenge around the idea that Emily had to suffer for hurting me. But our daughter was suffering, too. And for what? So I could nurse my wounded pride. The more I dwelled on it, the more that hollow guilt gnawed at me, taunting me with the question of whether all this destruction had truly mended anything in my heart. I told myself it was too late to back out. I'd gone too far, had too much to lose. But the agony in my chest wouldn't relent. In the final hearing, we faced each other in a gray conference room. A judge, 2 lawyers, and a clerk who typed every word. Emily was pale, her hair pinned neatly, though her eyes carried that haunted look. My attorney, Whitehall, brought forward the documents again, bristling with self-assurance. Emily's attorney calmly introduced an IT expert who explained certain anomalies. My pulse hammered. I felt sweat gathering at my temple. Then Emily's lawyer turned to me, gaze sharp. "Mr. Donovan, we'd like to request you personally verify these logs. You stated in your affidavit that you had no knowledge of them until they were discovered on Ms. Donovan's computer, correct?" My mouth felt dry. "Yes, and you are aware it would be a crime to produce or knowingly submit falsified documents to the court?" "Yes." They pressed further, but I stuck to my lie. My nails dug into my palms. Emily watched me with tears shining in her eyes. She must have realized I would never break in front of them. This was the final standoff. If they couldn't produce undeniable proof, the judge might dismiss their claim. When the session ended, the judge reserved his decision for a later date, citing the complexity of the evidence. My shoulders sagged. I caught Emily's reflection in the glass door as we left. She was crying silently. A distant part of me wanted to hug her, to feel the warmth of her body, and tell her we'd find a way through. But the memory of Ryan's hands on her flared in my mind. I kept walking. About a week later, I was in my office preparing for a sales meeting when I got the call from an unknown number. An authoritative male voice introduced himself as Detective Brooks from the local police. My heart skipped. They'd found new information about the alleged tampering. They wanted me to come in for questioning. My hand shook so violently I nearly dropped the phone. I told them I'd speak with my lawyer first. The detective's response was calm, cordial even, but it held a quiet determination that made my gut churn. Suddenly, the walls of my carefully constructed scheme felt like they were closing in. The weight of every forgery, every manipulative detail, came crashing down. After the call, I stumbled to the restroom, locked the door, and splashed cold water on my face. I stared in the mirror at the man I'd become. Eyes red, jaw clenched. I thought about my daughter. If I got arrested, if they found out the lengths I'd gone to, I might lose her. Trembling, I slid down against the tiles, burying my face in my hands. I didn't cry, but a sob built in my chest. I wanted to smash something, but there was no target except the reflection of my own guilt. 2 days later, I was sitting in my parked car in the lot behind the police station. My lawyer told me we could stall, maybe file for a motion to quash. But I couldn't keep running. The tension was strangling me from the inside. The detective was waiting. My phone buzzed. My lawyer, again, urging caution. But I just powered down the device. My daughter's face filled my thoughts, her bright smile, the way she used to run across the living room, arms outstretched for me to catch her. And Emily's face, tear-streaked, shattered. I took a breath. Then another. I exited the car, walked toward the building's side entrance. Rain beaded on my jacket. The world felt slow, like each step was magnified in my ears. Up ahead, I glimpsed a figure in a hooded jacket. As I drew closer, the figure turned. It was Emily, soaked to the bone, hair plastered to her cheeks. Her suitcase leaned against the wall. We stood there in the dim light, the distant street lamp flickering behind her. I froze. She didn't speak. I saw her lips pressed together. Then, quietly, she said, "I'm not here to bury you. I'm here to end this." I swallowed. "I'm supposed to meet with the detective." She nodded. "So am I." They want more statements. Silence enveloped us, broken only by the patter of rain on concrete. Our gazes locked. In her eyes, I saw the love we once shared, the betrayal that tainted it, and something else. Compassion. Or pity. Maybe both. "Michael," she whispered, voice trembling. "I did you wrong. I know that. You had every right to hate me. But it's too much." My chest felt too tight to breathe. "You think I wanted to see you suffer?" She closed her eyes. "I think you wanted to not feel weak. And hurting me was the only way you knew how to do that." My throat constricted. I glanced away. The door behind us led to a corridor of interrogation rooms. Paperwork, possible charges. Part of me wanted to drop to my knees and confess everything, to beg her forgiveness. But my pride strangled the words. She reached out, gently touching my sleeve. I almost recoiled but didn't. The rain soaked into my hair, dripped down my neck. "It's not too late to do the right thing," she said softly. "For our daughter." I looked into her eyes, searching for blame, for condemnation. Instead, all I saw was sadness, an exhaustion that matched my own. A tear ran down her cheek, mingling with the rain. I realized we were both just two broken people standing in a storm, mourning the life we once had. Slowly, I nodded. My jaw flexed, and I forced a raw, trembling exhale through my teeth. "I don't know who I am anymore," I said. "I thought I was protecting myself, but I might have destroyed everything." She didn't respond with anger. She just bowed her head for a moment, then gently squeezed my arm. It felt like an unspoken truce, fragile as glass, but real. The detective's shadow appeared at the glass door, scanning for us. I met Emily's gaze one last time. The moment felt like the final breath before diving into deep water. Inside that pause, I realized something crucial. I could keep lying, keep burying us both, or I could face the consequences and try, somehow, to salvage what remained of our humanity. I opened the door, stepping aside to let her in. Together, we entered. Later, much later, I stood outside the station, alone. My clothes were still damp. The interview had been long, my voice had trembled at times, but I'd answered each question with a truth I'd once never thought I'd speak. The forging of evidence, the misplaced rage, the lies. All of it. I might face charges, but it was like the first real breath I'd taken in months. Emily was gone, escorted out by a social worker and her lawyer. I didn't see her leave. But as I stepped onto the sidewalk, I noticed a single piece of paper tucked under the windshield wiper of my car. A note, scrawled in handwriting I recognized as hers. "We can't go back. But maybe we can go forward." My throat tightened. I pressed the note against my chest, the words throbbing in my mind. Forward. I looked at the reflection in my car window. Rain streaked the glass. I was a man undone, with an uncertain future. But at least I wasn't drowning in my own deceit anymore. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating the path ahead. I felt my pulse in my ears, not with dread this time, but with a raw, vulnerable acceptance. My footsteps were heavy as I walked away from the car, note still in my grip. I would have to face the legal ramifications, the scorn of the people who once pitied me, the shame of my daughter if she ever learned the truth. But in a strange way, I felt a rush of clarity, a sense that I was no longer enslaved by my silent fury. I remembered once telling Emily that cooking was my therapy, that stirring a sauce reminded me of how the simplest ingredients could blend into something comforting and whole. Tonight, though, I had no appetite for illusions. I had only the knowledge that I'd nearly lost myself in the pursuit of vengeance. I had only the battered remains of a life to rebuild for our daughter. I stood there for a long while, letting the night sky weep on my face. The words of the babysitter's camera, the whispers of neighbors, the click of an anonymous tip, they all dissolved into the background. What remained was the hushed beating of my heart, quiet and constant, a sign that, even though I'd been hollowed out, I was still alive. I turned my collar up against the rain and glanced back at the station. I thought of Emily, battered but still standing. We'd have to navigate the consequences. It would be messy, painful, and uncertain. But for the first time since that night in the kitchen, I felt something like a path forward, even if it was paved with guilt and regret. The storm raged overhead as I stepped toward my car. I remembered a line I once read. "You can't change the wind, but you can adjust your sails." Maybe it was cliché, but it rang true now in the thunderous dark. I placed Emily's note on the passenger seat. The next steps were unclear, but I wasn't the same man I'd been. No longer the naive husband. No longer the cold avenger. Something else. A father, yes. A flawed, broken man learning to breathe without the weight of lies. When I finally slipped behind the wheel, I realized my hands were steady. My voice, if I tried to speak, would be the same quiet timbre that I used when we first started dating all those years ago. Honest, uncertain, and open. I inhaled, exhaled, turned the key in the ignition. For a moment, I just let the engine idle, letting the rough purr of it remind me that life moves on, no matter how close we come to destroying ourselves. I shifted into drive. Beyond the swirling rain and the orange glow of streetlights was a future that might still hold atonement, forgiveness, if such things were possible. And if they weren't, at least I could face whatever came next with my head upright, no longer cowering in the shadows of my own treachery. So I drove. Through the flooded streets, past the flickering neon signs. My mind was still a storm, but there was a single truth pulsing beneath it all. I'd have to learn to be a man who could confront his guilt without drowning in it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the first step toward becoming someone who wouldn't need revenge to feel whole. I thought of Emily's final note, her shaky script. "We can't go back, but maybe we can go forward." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it might be true.